What if I told you that your money is designed to lose value? That there are hidden laws, ancient rules that powerful people know about, but you were never taught? Rules that explain why you work harder every year but feel poorer, why your savings shrink while billionaires get richer, why the game feels impossibly rigged. These aren't conspiracy theories, they're economic laws that have destroyed empires, toppled kings, and quietly stolen the wealth of ordinary people for thousands of years. And tonight, you're going to learn every single one of them. By the end of this video, you'll see the financial system with completely new eyes. You'll understand why inflation isn't random, why your savings account is a trap, and why the dollar itself might be living on borrowed time. The forgotten laws of money. Let's begin. Picture this. You're living in ancient Rome. You've got two coins in your hand. Both are supposed to be silver, but one coin is pure silver, minted years ago when Rome was strong. The other coin? It's mostly copper with just a thin coating of silver. The emperor debased it to pay for wars. Here's the question: which coin do you spend? If you said the fake one, congratulations, you just discovered the first forgotten law of money. It's called Gresham's Law, and it explains something you see every single day but probably never noticed. Back in the 1500s, a smart advisor named Sir Thomas Gresham told Queen Elizabeth I something that changed how we understand money forever. He said, "Bad money drives out good." Think about what that means. When two types of currency exist at the same time, one that's trustworthy and one that's been cheapened, people aren't stupid. They spend the garbage money and hide the good stuff. The Romans did this. When their emperors started mixing cheap metals into silver coins, citizens figured it out fast. They paid taxes with the junk coins and buried the pure silver in their backyards. They hoarded the real money and passed the fake money around like a hot potato. Medieval kings tried the same trick. They'd clip the edges off gold coins or swap gold for copper. And every single time, the same thing happened. People spent the fake coins immediately and saved the real ones. This is happening right now, by the way. You just don't realize it. When governments print money like crazy, when they inflate the currency and destroy its value, what do smart people do? They get rid of cash as fast as possible. They buy real estate, gold, stocks, Bitcoin, anything that holds value. They spend the dollars that are melting like ice cubes and hoard the assets that last. Gresham's Law is why nobody wants to hold cash anymore. It's why your grandmother's advice to save your money doesn't work in 2024. The bad money, inflated, debased, printed into oblivion, pushes out the good money every single time. But here's where it gets darker. Gresham's Law describes the slow death of money, but there's another law that describes the fast death, the sudden catastrophic collapse. It's called Thiers Law. Named after a French politician in the 1800s, this law says that when things get really bad, when the whole system is burning, the logic flips completely. In a total crisis, good money drives out bad. Let me paint you a picture. Germany, 1923, Weimar Republic. Hyperinflation is raging like a wildfire. Prices aren't just going up, they're doubling every couple of days. A loaf of bread that cost 250 marks in January costs 200 billion marks by November. People are carrying wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy groceries. Money is literally worthless. What do you think happens in that environment? Nobody, and I mean nobody, wants to hold the German mark for even 1 second longer than necessary. The moment you get paid, you sprint to the store and buy anything real. Food, tools, fabric, anything. Or you trade your marks for dollars, for gold, for cigarettes, anything with actual value. The bad money gets rejected completely. It drives itself out. The good money, the stable foreign currency, the precious metals, that's what everyone wants. This happened in Zimbabwe, in Venezuela, in Hungary after World War II, in every hyperinflation in history. Thiers Law is the moment the curtain gets pulled back and everyone sees that the emperor has no clothes. The government's promises become worthless. The paper becomes trash, and people flee into anything real. Gresham's Law is the cancer. Thiers Law is the heart attack. And both of them prove the same point. You cannot cheat the laws of money. You can delay them, disguise them, deny them, but you cannot escape them. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but we're not in hyperinflation. We're fine, right? Wrong, because there's another law operating right now, right under your nose, and it's stealing from you every single day. Let's talk about the Cantillon Effect. This might be the most important economic concept you've never heard of. In the early 1700s, there was this brilliant Irish-French economist named Richard Cantillon, and he noticed something that everyone else missed. When new money gets created, it doesn't spread evenly through the economy, like water filling a pool. It enters at specific points, and the people closest to that entry point get rich. Everyone else gets robbed. Here's how it works. Imagine the government decides to print $1 trillion. Who gets that money first? Banks, big corporations, Wall Street, government contractors, the wealthy elite with connections. They get to spend that fresh money before prices go up. They buy stocks, real estate, businesses, all at yesterday's prices. Then, slowly, that money trickles down. It moves through the economy. By the time it reaches you, the worker, the saver, the regular person, prices have already risen. You're getting the money last, but you're paying the new, higher prices first. This is the Cantillon Effect, and it explains everything. It explains why after the 2008 crash, the Federal Reserve printed trillions of dollars and the stock market soared to record highs. But your wages barely moved. It explains why during COVID, they printed more money in 2 years than in the previous 2 decades. And Wall Street had its best run ever, while your grocery bills doubled. It explains why housing is unaffordable, why college costs a fortune, why healthcare is bankrupting families. Because inflation isn't just prices going up. Inflation is a wealth transfer, from the people who get the money last to the people who get it first. You are not on the winning side of that transfer. The Cantillon Effect is the hidden theft at the heart of the modern financial system. The rich don't just earn more money, they literally receive money differently than you do. Earlier, first, when it's still worth something. And by the time you get your stimulus check or your paycheck, the value has already been siphoned away. This isn't a bug. This is the design. Now, let's say you understand all of this. You realize the money is being debased. You see the Cantillon Effect in action. So, you decide to protect yourself. You're going to save, build a nest egg, be responsible. Guess what? They've got a trap for that too. It's called financial repression. After World War II, governments around the world had a massive problem. They were drowning in debt. They'd borrowed unbelievable amounts to fight the war, and now the bill was due. They had 3 options: raise taxes and spark riots, default on the debt and destroy their credibility, or find a sneakier way. They chose option 3. Here's what they did. Central banks forced interest rates way down, often below the rate of inflation. So, if inflation was running at 4%, but your savings account paid 2%, you were guaranteed to lose money every single year. At the same time, they put capital controls in place, rules that made it hard or impossible for you to move your money out of the country or buy alternative assets like gold. You were trapped, locked into a system designed to drain your wealth slowly, silently, year after year. The government got to inflate away its debt. You got to watch your savings evaporate. They called it financial repression, and it worked beautifully. For them. Now fast forward to today. After 2008, interest rates dropped to nearly zero for over a decade. Savers lost trillions in real purchasing power. Meanwhile, anyone who owned stocks or real estate got filthy rich as asset prices exploded. Then COVID hit. Rates went even lower. Money printer went burr. And the same thing happened again. Your savings account pays what? 0.5%? Maybe 1%? Meanwhile, real inflation, the stuff you actually buy, like food and rent, is running way higher. You are being repressed. Right now. Today. Financial repression is the invisible tax. You can't see it on your pay stub, there's no line item for it, but it's eating your wealth alive. And most people never even realize it's happening. They just feel poorer and don't understand why. Okay, so we've covered laws that hurt individuals, but some laws destroy entire empires. Let me introduce you to Triffin's Paradox. This is the trap that's slowly killing the United States right now. In the 1960s, an economist named Robert Triffin stood before the U.S. Congress and delivered a warning. He said the system they'd built, the Bretton Woods system, where the dollar was the world's reserve currency, had a fatal flaw built into it. Here's the paradox. If the dollar is the global reserve currency, then the whole world needs dollars to do business. Trade, investments, oil purchases, everything runs on dollars. So America has to supply those dollars. How? By running trade deficits, by spending more abroad than it earns, by sending dollars overseas so other countries have enough liquidity. In the short term, this is awesome. America gets to print money and buy real goods from other countries. It's an incredible privilege. But in the long term, it's a death sentence. Because the more dollars you flood the world with, the weaker each dollar becomes. The more debt you pile up, the more your own domestic economy gets hollowed out. Factories close because it's cheaper to import. Industries move overseas. The trade deficit becomes permanent. Debt explodes. To stay the world's reserve currency, you have to sacrifice your own economic health. Triffin warned about this in the 60s. In 1971, his prediction came true. Richard Nixon ended the gold standard because there were too many dollars chasing too little gold. The system broke. Since then, the U.S. has run endless trade deficits. It's exported dollars and imported everything else. The dollar stayed king, but the price was the gutting of the American middle class. The paradox is brutal. The reserve currency is both the ultimate power and the ultimate poison. And now, the poison is starting to take effect. China, Russia, Brazil, India, they're all building alternatives to the dollar. Central banks are buying gold at the fastest pace in 50 years. The BRICS nations are experimenting with new payment systems. The dollar's dominance gave America unmatched power for decades. But Triffin's paradox guarantees that dominance carries the seeds of collapse. The crown is also the curse. Now here's the really messed up part. Governments and central banks know about some of these problems. They try to fix them. They set targets: inflation at 2%, unemployment at 5%, GDP growth at 3%. And every single time they do this, they make things worse. There's a law for this too. It's called Goodhart's Law. In the 1970s, British economist Charles Goodhart made a simple observation. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Think about what that means. Let's say the central bank decides inflation must be 2%. That sounds reasonable, right? Stable prices, predictable economy, everyone's happy. But now that 2% is the target, they'll do anything to hit it. Manipulate interest rates, inject money into the system, fuel bubbles, change how inflation is calculated. And boom, suddenly the official inflation number says 2%. But your rent doubled, your groceries cost twice as much, and your health insurance is through the roof. The measure stopped measuring reality. It started measuring whatever they needed it to say. Same thing with GDP. Politicians worship GDP growth, so they'll do anything to make that number go up. Pile on debt, inflate bubbles, offshore industries, fake the statistics. The number goes up. The country gets weaker. Goodhart's Law is why you can't trust the official numbers anymore. Because once the government decides it must hit a specific target, it stops reporting the truth and starts managing the optics. Unemployment looks low because they stopped counting people who gave up looking for work. Inflation looks tame because they swapped out expensive items in the basket for cheaper ones. GDP looks strong because it's fueled entirely by government borrowing. The targets warped the measurements. And now we're flying blind, pretending everything is fine while the plane is on fire. And that brings us to the final law, the endgame, the place where every empire eventually arrives. It's called the law of diminishing returns on debt. Here's how it works. In the beginning, debt is magic. Borrow $1, invest it wisely, get back $2 of growth. Debt builds highways, factories, schools. It accelerates progress. But over time, as debt piles higher and higher, the returns shrink. Now you borrow $1 and only get 50 cents of growth. Then 25 cents. Then nothing. Eventually, you're borrowing just to pay interest on old debt. The growth engine sputters. The machine doesn't accelerate anymore. It just groans under its own weight. We are living in that stage right now. The United States has over $34 trillion in debt. Every year, they borrow trillions more. And what does it produce? Not much. It props up the stock market, funds entitlements, pays interest to bondholders, keeps the illusion going for one more year. But real productive growth, real wealth creation, stagnant. The math doesn't lie. We've hit debt saturation. We're past the point where borrowing creates prosperity. Now, we're in the stage where borrowing just delays collapse. Every empire hits this wall. Rome debased its coins when expansion slowed and debt mounted.
La monarchie borrowed itself into oblivion before the Revolution. The British Empire strained under debt after 2 world wars and lost its status. And now it's America's turn. The law of diminishing returns on debt is the most merciless of all. Because once you're caught in it, there's no easy way out. You can't borrow your way out of a borrowing problem. You can't print your way to prosperity. You can only delay, deny, and hope the collapse happens on someone else's watch. So, let's step back. What do all these laws teach us? They teach us that money isn't magic. It's not mysterious. It follows rules, hard rules, ancient rules. Bad money pushes out good until the system breaks. Crises force people to abandon fake money and flee to real assets. New money always enriches those closest to the source first. Governments trap their citizens to quietly erase debt through inflation. Reserve currencies hollow out the empires that issue them. Targets and measurements get gamed and manipulated until they're meaningless. And debt, in the end, devours itself. These aren't theories. These are survival codes written in the bones of history. They explain why your paycheck never seems to go far enough, why your savings lose value even when you're being responsible, why Wall Street hits record highs while Main Street falls apart, why your parents could buy a house on 1 income but you can't afford rent on 2. These aren't random events. This isn't bad luck. This is the system operating exactly as designed. And here's the hardest truth of all. The game was never built for you to win. You live under transparency. The elites live under secrecy. You file taxes on every dollar. They shift assets through loopholes and offshore havens. You earn wages that get taxed immediately. They receive money first before inflation hits. You hold cash that melts. They hold assets that multiply. The system has laws, and unless you understand them, you'll always be playing blind. You'll always wonder why you're working harder but getting nowhere. You'll always feel like something's rigged, but you won't be able to point to exactly what. Now you know. Now you've seen the laws that govern money, empires, and wealth. History doesn't repeat, but the laws remain. And if you ignore them, they will crush you just like they crushed every empire that thought it had figured out a shortcut. The forgotten laws of money are forgotten for a reason, because the people in power would rather you didn't know them. But now you do. If this video opened your eyes, hit that subscribe button, because history holds the answers to every crisis we're facing today, and I'll keep showing you where to look.